Narcissistic parental alienation. This is something that I have been very hesitant to talk about and have really tried to make sure that I have done my homework, even though it's a topic that I've been interested in for maybe the last 13 years. So after having enough requests for it and seeing it so much in my social media and in so many feeds, I've decided that we should maybe go down that rabbit hole and have a look at narcissistic parental alienation, while keeping in mind that this can happen to both mum or dad. Welcome to episode number 49 of the Self-Improvement Room. I'm your host, Kristy Davis, and today we are discussing a very serious topic and a very distressing one, and that is narcissistic parental alienation. Now, if you know someone that has been through this, or you have been through this yourself, you understand why it's such a serious topic, why it is such an emotional topic. And this is why I've really tried to take both sides and do a bit of homework. And my aim for this episode isn't to put anyone down, it is simply to just give the information. Now, what you do with the information is completely up to you. I am just hopeful that it will help someone, and that's why I'm talking about it today. So let's start with what narcissistic parental alienation syndrome is. It's a form of psychological abuse, and it can wreak havoc on families, and it leaves deep emotional scars on children and alienated parents. Now, in this episode, I want to explore the impact of narcissistic parental alienation on children, the motivations behind why narcissistic parents engage in this type of behavior, the potential gains and losses for the alienating parent, and I also want to talk about 5 signs of narcissistic parental alienation and give you some tips on how to combat this type of behavior. The problem that we have is children are caught in the crossfire of narcissistic parental alienation, and they often suffer incredibly profound emotional and psychological harm. The manipulation and the brainwashing tactics employed by the alienating parent can lead to many ongoing issues, which is why there's actually a push for parental alienation to be included in the DSM-5, or the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. Now let's just talk about some of the effects of this type of behavior, what effects it can have on children. Number 1, emotional distress. Children can experience intense feelings of confusion, guilt, anger, and sadness. And that constant tide of negative information about the targeted parent can make it difficult for the child to form a balanced perspective. And that can lead to emotional confusion and ultimately turmoil. Children don't have the capacity to understand perspectives. They just listen to the information that they are given, and usually they take it on board as being their own problem. Number 2, they develop trust issues. Trust is a fundamental component of healthy relationships. Narcissistic parental alienation can completely erode a child's ability to trust others. They're taught to view the targeted parent with suspicion and doubt, and that mistrust can extend to other relationships in your child's life, making it incredibly difficult to form and maintain relationships of any kind. It can really create attachment issues, which can last their entire life if they never see anyone to get help for it. Number 3, they can really struggle with their identity because children often see themselves as reflections of their parents. Think back to when you were young. I know for me it's getting hard. It's getting to be a long time since I was young. But you as a child see yourself in your parents. So when one parent is vilified, sometimes kids can really struggle with their sense of self and identity. They might question their own worth and their own value, and that can lead to long-term self-esteem issues. These children are part of both parents. If you are constantly hearing bad things about your parent, of course you're not going to feel great about yourself. And that still happens today as an adult, I think. If somebody says something about my mum that is awful, I'm the first one to be really upset and frustrated. Because even though I know my own identity, I still feel like I'm part of her. So identity struggles are a really big thing with parental alienation. Number 4, it can really lead to behavioral issues. The stress and confusion caused by parental alienation can manifest in a lot of different ways, but most certainly in behavioral problems. Kids often act out. They withdraw socially or they struggle academically as they attempt to cope with that internal conflict and the emotional pain. And that can really hang around way into your adult life. And you see a lot of adults still struggling with the effect or the impact of child parental alienation. And because it's only now just becoming more known, just being talked about, it's only now that a lot of adults are realizing that this is what happened to them. And now that they realize this, they're able to seek help for it. But what we want to do is make sure that we don't repeat what our parents did with our children. Because number 5, like I said, there are long-term psychological effects. The long-term psychological effects of narcissistic parental alienation can include depression, anxiety, and even PTSD. It can really be that serious. The damage inflicted during childhood can have lasting repercussions well into adulthood. And the problem with narcissistic parental alienation syndrome is that the offending parent could listen to this and still believe that it's the other parent that has the problem. And that is what we're facing when we don't do our own self-work, when we don't take responsibility for who we are, what we say, what we do, when we don't take responsibility for self-growth, for self-improvement. And that's one of the reasons we created the self-improvement room, so we can really work on our own self-growth and be the best people that we can be, so we can contribute to not only society, but really to our family, to our spouse, to our children, to our parents, to our siblings. Before we engage in this kind of behavior with our children, whether we're angry or not, whether we feel justified or not, we really must consider the children first. Because if you have children, then you need to put their feelings and their emotions in this particular situation above your own. Because you need to do what is right for them. You are their advocate. They can't advocate for themselves. They are too young to advocate for themselves. That's why you need to do it. And if you are angry or you've got a bone that you just can't let go of, then there is a very, very good chance that you will be far more interested in the outcome that is favorable to you and fulfilling your emotional needs. And unfortunately, that doesn't always go hand in hand with what is best for your child. Why do narcissistic parents engage in parental alienation? And this is a question that I've asked myself a lot over the years because I've seen firsthand the impact that parental alienation can have. And so when researching this topic, I found that there are several reasons why parents engage in parental alienation. And it's often due to their own psychological needs and their insecurities. So number one is control and power. Narcissistic people thrive on control and they thrive on power. And by alienating the other parent, they assert dominance and maintain control over their child's thoughts and feelings. This need for control is often put before the needs of the child. Number two, revenge and punishment. In a lot of cases, parental alienation is driven by a desire for revenge. The narcissistic parent may feel wronged or betrayed by the other parent and then use the child as a pawn to inflict emotional pain and punishment. And that is why our family court system is so backed up. Now, our family court system is there to protect children, but a lot of the time they are dealing with parents who just want to get back at each other. Parents who haven't done their own work and who want to use the court system to control their ex-partner. And it's very expensive. It's very, very expensive to go to court. And that's why so many parents who are alienated feel so helpless. Because if they don't have the money to fight in court, then they just have to deal with not seeing their child. And that is one of the biggest pains you can inflict on someone. And if you can do that to someone and you're a narcissistic parent, then you feel like you've just won the lottery. Whether your ex-partner cheated on you or left you because they didn't want to be with you anymore, or you were growing apart, or they just didn't want to be in the marriage anymore, that is not the child's fault. In fact, that has nothing to do with the child and their parenting. Now, of course, if the mother or father was dangerous to the child, and I don't mean dangerous because you want to push them until they break and then you want to use that as evidence against them. And I'm not saying there's no excuse for anyone ever doing the wrong thing or breaking the law. But if you are going to try to push the father or the mother of the child into a corner where they make these mistakes, then it is absolutely your job to protect your child. But there are measures in place to do that and to do that correctly. And yes, sometimes that doesn't work, which is why the family court is very careful in their decision making. And sometimes they get it wrong, but they are dealing with so many cases where they just don't know where the truth lies. So revenge and punishment is a big reason for narcissistic parental alienation. Number 3 is validation and approval. Narcissists crave validation and approval. So by manipulating their child to side with them and reject the other parent, they gain a sense of superiority and self-worth. Self-worth shouldn't come from the outside. That's something that we have to cultivate as for ourselves. But with a narcissistic parent, the child's allegiance serves as a constant source of validation for the alienating parent. So when you look at the main reasons parents engage in parental alienation, you've got control and power, revenge and punishment, and validation and approval. All of those things can be fixed if you're working on yourself, if you're trying to be the best version of yourself. I truly believe that there are some people who don't want to change, who are quite happy being this way. And then I believe that there are others that don't even know that they are doing this, that they are narcissistic. And I think if you're willing to change and you're willing to see that behavior, then perhaps we can remove the title of narcissistic, because it's a very overused word, and an angry parent who makes a few bad decisions isn't a narcissist. A narcissistic parent continues to behave the same way over and over, regardless of the damage that is being done to their child. They put their own feelings and their own emotional needs above their children every time. As long as they can feel in control, as long as they can feel power, as long as they are getting revenge, as long as they're dishing out punishment, as long as they are feeling validated, and as long as they feel like they are getting self-worth from somewhere. I want to talk about the gains and the losses of narcissistic parental alienation, because when we look at this topic and we break it down, it can be really hard to understand, why this happens. And I get being angry for a long time. I even understand, I do, making some mistakes when it comes to parenting. We all make a lot of mistakes when it comes to parenting. But when you're doing it over and over and over, and you're not considering the damage, or you are considering the damage and you don't care, that's where we have a real problem. So one of the gains for a narcissistic parent is emotional satisfaction. The alienating parent gains emotional satisfaction from seeing the targeted parent suffer from having the child's undivided loyalty. Another gain is the control, maintaining control over the child and the narrative surrounding the parental relationship. Another gain of parental alienation for the alienating parent is control, maintaining control over the child, and also the narrative surrounding the parental relationship feeds the narcissistic parent's need for dominance. The next one is validation. The unwavering support and allegiance of the child provide the narcissistic parent with a steady stream of validation and affirmation. Let's talk about the losses though. Number 1, damaged relationships. The manipulative tactics used potentially damaging your relationship with the child forever, because the child grows older and they start to gain perspective. So there will come a time where that child will understand exactly what the alienating parent has done. Number 2 is the emotional turmoil. The ongoing effort to maintain this facade of alienation can create stress and emotional turmoil for the narcissistic parent, and that impacts their overall well-being as well. And then they have the loss of relationship and respect. Their relationship with their child will probably eventually break down, and in the long run, they might lose contact with their child completely. It's really not worth going down this path. I want to end with 5 signs of narcissistic parental alienation. Number 1, constant criticism of the targeted parent. The alienating parent consistently criticizes and belittles the targeted parent in front of the child, painting them in a negative light regardless of the circumstances. So that's number 1 sign. Number 2, manipulation and brainwashing. The alienating parent manipulates the child's perceptions and beliefs. So they use lies, exaggerations, false accusations to turn the child against the other parent. And then the child actually starts to regurgitate the alienating parent's thoughts and beliefs and no longer feels guilty when the hurt parent is targeted. Number 3, restricting contact. The alienating parent restricts or interferes with the child's contact with the targeted parent, making excuses to limit visitation and communication. Whether you've got court orders or not, usually there is still an element of these games. Number 4, the alienating parent uses emotional manipulation, such as guilt tripping or playing the victim to coerce their child into rejecting the other parent. And number 5 sign to look out for is encouraging rejection. The alienating parent encourages and rewards their child for rejecting the targeted parent, creating an environment where negative behavior towards the other parent is not only validated, but it's supported and celebrated. You're not raising a good child if you're going to be supporting and validating that kind of behavior. So here are 4 tips to help you combat narcissistic parental alienation. Number 1, document everything. Keep detailed records of all of your interactions, communications, and incidents related to alienation, because that documentation can be crucial in any legal proceedings and in demonstrating a pattern of manipulation. Number 2, seek professional help. See a therapist or a counselor experienced in dealing with parental alienation. Professional support can provide guidance, emotional support, and strategies for dealing with the effects of alienation on the child, as well as for the parent. But you have to make sure that your therapist understands parental alienation syndrome. But you have to make sure that your therapist or counselor understands parental alienation. Number 3, maintain open communication. Continue to reach out and communicate with your child, even if it feels challenging. Let your child know that you are there for them and that you love them unconditionally. This can be so difficult, especially when they're regurgitating what their other parent says. Consistent communication can help counteract the negative influence of the alienating parent. Now, if you don't have the opportunity to connect with your child because of the severity of parental alienation, write in a journal, keep notes, keep a diary so that one day you can share things with your child. And I'm not talking about a diary that says your mother or your father is XYZ and today I feel like this and that. That's for another diary. That's for another journal. The type of journal you want to keep are memories that you'd like to share with your child, things that you'd like to do with them when you see them, so that they can understand when they do read it, you've always wanted to spend time with them and you've got plans with them and you are really engaged and involved in their lives. And number 4, and I think this can be one of the hardest things, but you always have to remember that your child is the victim. It can be very easy to get frustrated with a child or a teenager who is consistently rude and mistreats you, who rejects you and seems as though they are punishing you. But they are the victim. They are the victim of the alienating parent's manipulation. So as hard as it is, stay kind and connected with your child and remember that they need you now more than ever. Narcissistic parental alienation is deeply damaging behavior, and as I've said, it can have lasting effects on the children and families. The emotional and psychological toll on children can be profound, and it will lead to issues of trust, identity, and mental health. Narcissistic parents engage in this behavior for control, revenge, and validation, and often at a great cost to their relationship with their child and their well-being. Beyond the sometimes irreparable mental health impacts this has on your child, beyond the sometimes irreparable mental health impacts this has on a child, there are many adults who have ended their own lives because the pain of this insidious behavior is just too great. Think about that. But again, the trouble can be that the narcissistic parent just doesn't think they are in the wrong. They just think that they are entitled to behave this way, and the trouble lies with the other parent. So that's why it's important to recognize the signs of narcissistic parental alienation and take proactive steps to combat it. By documenting all of your interactions, by seeking professional help, maintaining open communication, or keeping a diary for your child, and remembering that your child is the victim, alienated parents can work towards protecting their relationship with their child and mitigating the damage caused by the alienating parent. Ultimately, the goal is to prioritize the well-being of the child and create an environment where they can develop healthy, loving relationships with both parents. And while that journey might be challenging, perseverance and support can pave the way for healing and reconciliation. As I said, this is a very, very emotional, very deep topic. And I think it's a conversation that we really need to start having. And speaking of conversations that we can start having, if you haven't already, make sure you join or check out and join the Self-Improvement Room Facebook community. So it's a new thing that we have just started, and it's a safe place to come and talk, to seek advice or opinions, share your feelings, to share your stories, to encourage and support each other. We will leave the link in the show notes, and you can then join us in our Self-Improvement Room Facebook community. All right, until next time, stay safe and stay well.